The House will come to order. Messages from the Senate.
Here's the language.
Message from the Senate. This is the Freiberg motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file herewith returned as amended by the Senate, which amendment to concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File 2236, an act relating to state government. Freiberg moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House File 2236 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
I recognize the author, Representative Freiberg, to explain the Senate amendments.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The House unanimously approved this bill on April 24th. Now, just to remind members about what the bill did, it allows certain meeting notices for state agencies to be published in the state register or on the agency's website. It's intended to correct a notice problem in the case of special meetings. Current law allows special meetings to be noticed by publication in the state register or on the agency's principal bulletin board. But if you've been to any newer state office building, you have to go through security, so the bulletin board may actually be in a place that is completely inaccessible to the public. Now, unfortunately, special meetings require 3 days' notice, but the state register requires 7 days' notice to publish. So if a meeting needs to happen between 3 and 7 days, the meeting notice would need to be published on the state agency's bulletin board, which might be inaccessible to the public. Now, the bill would allow the notice to be published in either the state register or on the agency's website, and it's intended to increase access to notice to public meetings from what is in current law. As I mentioned, that provision was adopted unanimously by the House of Representatives. Now, when the Senate heard the bill a few days ago, it added a provision related to the use of social media that is similar but not identical to a bill we discussed a week or two ago. Essentially, what this provision does is state that local officials can use social media without fear of violating the open meeting law if the use of social media is limited to exchanges with all members of the general public. This is narrower than the version the House discussed earlier, which applied to exchanges with some members of the general public and could arguably have included things like closed Facebook groups. This language came from the Minnesota Association of Townships. Many townships have boards consisting of only 3 members, so if one member posts something not related to official township business on Facebook and another member of the board likes that post, they have some concern that they would be subject to an open meeting law charge. So this is an issue that rural communities would particularly like to see addressed. The language is also supported by the League of Minnesota Cities, the Association of Minnesota Counties, and the Minnesota School Boards Association. The Minnesota Newspaper Association has opposed earlier versions of this language, but is neutral towards this language. I know some members expressed concerns that this language would enable members of local councils and boards to bypass the open meeting law and conduct official business in a manner that is not properly noticed. Let me just say that this is not true. Other statutes and case law govern notice requirements and serial meetings. This language would not change those statutes or the case law interpreting them. So if members of a city council or township board were discussing official business in the comment thread to a Facebook post, they would be violating the open meeting law, and this change in law would not alter that. If members have questions, I'm happy to answer them. If the questions relate to the Senate language, I know that Representative Quam is also available to answer them. Otherwise, I would urge a green vote.
Representative,
and I would request a roll call.
Representative Freiberg requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hornstein, for what purpose do you rise?
Madam Speaker, I have a point of personal privilege.
State your point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. We have some honored guests here visiting from overseas that I wanted to introduce you to. Over here to my left on the bench, we welcome to the Capitol a group of visitors from the Palestinian Heritage Museum in East Jerusalem. These 7 young women and their chaperones are part of Design Diaries International. It's an exchange program with the Minnesota Historical Society, sponsored by the United States State Department. All year, participants in this program have studied history and culture through the lens of fashion and textiles. Last month, a group of 7 young Minnesota women visited the Palestinian Heritage Museum in East Jerusalem, which is sponsored by the Dar al-Tifl al-Arabi organization. And then tomorrow night, members, Our visitors, along with their Minnesota friends, will participate in a fashion show at the Minnesota History Center and show the work that they have done over the past year. So we welcome them to Minnesota, and we welcome them to our state capital, our honored guests from East Jerusalem.
Discussion on the motion to concur. Representative Holberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Well, we had a similar discussion around similar language with a bill that Representative Quam brought to the House floor a couple weeks ago. And I have grave concerns with this language that was inserted in the Senate, and I don't think it's just as easy as saying, well, will allow public officials to communicate on social media as long as they're not violating the standards of serial meeting, etc. You have to go back to what is the purpose of an open meeting law, and the purpose of the open meeting law is that the discussion would be held in the public square. In other words, people would come in current standard. You have to state your name for the record. There's an exchange of ideas. Everybody's in the same place at the same time. When I spoke with township lobbyists around this, I said, well, why don't you have some guardrails around this? I understand if you're posting and just doing notice, etc., why you might need some language around using social media. But the whole concept of an open meeting and knowing who you're talking to and having a way to track information, its source, whether it's valid, and allow others all to come at the same place and the same time to exchange information, in my mind, is very important to the process of public policy. And so I don't think that the solution is as simple as what's before you today, because it's not just the communication or the information provided by the public official, but it's the interchange of information outside of the open meeting in which members of the community that cared about a particular issue would be completely in the dark regarding the exchange and or the validity of the information that on some level could inform or influence a decision-making body in something important to the public. And so I am asking that you vote red on the motion to concur with the language that was put on the Senate floor. It's not ready for prime time. This issue is more complex than the amendment that they put on.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hertas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise in support of the comments earlier made by Representative Holberg. My concern with this, again, is not with the purpose of making greater access, but you have engagements with social media where oftentimes you don't really know who the respondents are. They might be with a screen name, might be Mickey Mouse, might be Rabbit One. You don't really know if these are really people that are even members of your constituency or reside within the area that might be affected by these decisions. And so I think that the social media, as we all look at our inboxes and see how we get tons of email in terms of bulk emails, that this can be abused in a way to shape the policies, shape the attitudes of the people that would be participating in it. I think there's nothing wrong with having a website at a city hall, a township. Certainly nothing wrong with having a blog and allowing people who are members of the community or within that local government unit to make comments about an issue that's going to be discussed. I think it's totally appropriate for elected officials to be able to visit that website or blog and see what people are thinking. But I would hope that this doesn't become something that would be reducing the function of a township hall meeting or council meeting or planning commission meeting to be just ceremonial in terms of passing decisions that have been made out of the realm of the public square. So I wholeheartedly support the comments that Representative Holberg made. I've earlier talked about a situation here in the Metro where open meeting law was violated, and I would urge you to concur that this isn't ready yet. It needs more work, and to not concur. Thank you.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Norton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Freiberg yield for a question, please?
He will yield. Representative Norton.
Thank you. Representative Freiberg, I tried catching you before we started and you weren't at your seat, so I'm going to ask you here. I'm a little concerned with the use of the term all that was added, because as I read this, I actually use social media quite a bit, and I know this, I'm no longer on the school board, so it doesn't apply to me in exactly the same way, but putting myself back in that frame, if it says all members of the general public and I have a Facebook page or other social media outlet and I choose to not allow people on my page, either because they're harassing or they don't agree with me or whatever, I am no longer, I believe I would be no longer in compliance with this particular law. So if that's the case, Representative Freiberg, could you confirm for me whether public officials moving ahead, if they use social media, can no longer restrict access to any member of the general public if we add the term all?
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Norton for the question. I do believe if it does say all there, so if you are restricting access to your Facebook page, this provision would not apply to you. I don't necessarily agree that that means that you would be violating the open meeting law in every case, in every instance that you post something in that instance. If your colleagues are involved, I think there are procedures you could still follow. For example, I think you could exclude other members of your board if the open meeting law applies to you. You would have the authority to exclude other members of your board from viewing your page, in which case I think you would be protected under the open meeting law still.
Representative Norton.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate your response. I do think there are ways that a member could limit themselves to not violate other portions of the open meeting law, but I do think we really need to understand what we're saying here, and maybe that's what we want to do as a body. But I, as a public official, do limit access to my page. I have a personal page and I have a professional page, and I limit access on occasion. And if there are people I don't know and I can't find out anything about them, I limit them. And then if I use that as a venue to share any information about what I'm doing, I'm afraid I would now be violating this new portion. So I understand what you're trying to do and what Representative Quam was trying to do. I think it's a worthy discussion. I don't think this is a robust enough solution to the problems at hand. So I'm very concerned with this moving forward right now, and I just wanted to be clear and have you address that. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to concur. The member from Roseau, Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Freiberg, in your exchange with Representative Norton, I started counting the number of times that you said, "I think." And when I started counting, I found 6 more times that you used the phrase, "I think." Members, this is not something that we should be doing on the House floor when we're doing something as serious as open meeting laws. And to answer questions with the phrase, "I think," quite frankly, I think we're opening a can of legal worms here that we really don't want to open. Members, I would strongly encourage a no vote on concurrence. Thank you.
The member from Mille Lacs, Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Freiberg yield to a question, please?
He will yield. Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Freiberg, who will be the watchdog if there are violations? Because I know the Minnesota Newspaper Association has been the watchdog of much of what happens in the open meeting law. But here, I'm wondering who will be the watchdog when this is occurring on social media?
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Erickson. The current enforcement mechanism for the open meeting law is that any interested party may bring an enforcement action. against somebody they suspect has violated the open meeting law. So that enforcement mechanism remains in place. I'm glad you referenced the Newspaper Association, Representative Erickson. They have been very diligent in making sure that all meetings are open to the public and that no official business is conducted in a forum that is not open to the public. So I think it's telling then that they dropped their opposition to this provision because of that. I think if this were to cause a problem, there's no way that they would support it, but they are neutral on this position the way it is.
Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Freiberg. Yes, the Minnesota Newspaper Association is an excellent watchdog organization, but I believe they're neutral on this. I don't think they've come out in favor of it. So I have one more question. Would he yield, please?
He will yield. Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Freiberg, what is it you envision then? Do you envision that, for example, let's take a township, has a Facebook page that is open for public comment? How will, and I think this piggybacks on Representative Norton's question, how will that township know that those who are commenting are actually their constituents? Because there could be an array of comments made on an issue that can occur on Facebook. I have a Facebook page and all sorts of comments that aren't relevant to me at all occur because of the friends that I have. And it's not saying anything negative about my friends, but my friends have friends. And so the conversations that go on a Facebook page can cover a myriad of comments and ideas. So will you explain to the body what you envision?
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Erickson. I guess I'm not sure I fully understand the question. There's no requirement in current law that correspondences, whether they're via social media or email or just with the person you meet at your local parade, there's no requirement that those people be constituents of yours. As you and I both have Facebook pages, I get lots of comments on there. I don't know which of those people are constituents and which ones aren't. And this bill wouldn't change any of that. And with regards to Representative Norton's comments, which you referenced, I guess I would just also say, if this language weren't adopted, both she and you and if she were a local official, she would have the same problem. I mean, there's ambiguity in the law right now as to what happens when if more than one local official is on the same Facebook page at the same time, even if they're not discussing official business, because under this they still can't. This just clarifies that language. If this isn't adopted, the situation would be the same as the question Representative Norton asked.
Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I have grave concerns about this because I don't hear you saying that the name and address of the person making the comment would have to be stated, as we have to do at an open meeting. Even in our meetings in committee, the person testifying states name, and the page always takes care of making sure that the sign-in contains the address and the phone number. And this will not be, as far as I can tell by this vague language, a requirement. So members, unfortunately, I'm going to oppose this concurrence.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, pretty simple to read. You're only exempted if you use social media and it's limited to exchanges with members of the general public. So you're not exempted if you communicate anything with another member on the board. I tell you, when we had the stadium issue, any social media I was on, I received postings, questions, queries, comments, and I could call them other things that were put onto there by the general public. And I responded to them. And that was appropriate. So, if one board member, one director of a township corresponds with social media to another, you run the risk of violating. If you're talking to the people and you go on a college go to a college campus look at some of the big classrooms. They're a lot quieter than when I was in college. You know why? Because I can't grab my phone and do the text or do the other stuff, because they're communicating that way. And this was brought about years ago. You can ask the present chair of government ops. This had repeated meetings in committee to hash out, to do the work, etc. This is not the compromise language I would have drafted, but it's a compromise language that came about because of the group that was quoted as being the watchdog of the open meeting law requested and demanded this language. There was previous versions that went down and stipulated X, Y, Z. It said you had to, at the public meeting, tell exactly what social media you were going to use. And it went down and gave the comfort language. But that was not what the watchdog wanted. The watchdog wanted this language. They said it would expand the scope. So the exception is limited to only communication with the general public, members of the general public. So frankly, anything that goes on the internet, you doubt that can be brought up and found. I don't think any of us are naive enough to think that we could post something we didn't want seen anywhere on the internet and not have it show up. So actually, if the people that are now and in past decades have violated and subverted the open meeting law wish to, the worst place they could do it would be the internet and social media, because there's a trail of proof. You say, well, that's anonymous. Well, frankly, it isn't, because there are techniques, and they've been used to track, communications before. So, if you don't want to have the capability of a township member talking to their elected official and communicating with what is now becoming, if not already is, the standard for communicating in this, we're in the 21st century now, and, at some time we have to face the reality that it's different. And this is the Peace in the Valley compromise. Well, we could have written a 47-page dissertation, but this is what they wanted to come up to. So I understand the concerns. All this does is protect the people who actually want to communicate with their public. Because frankly, anyone that has or would want to subvert open meeting law, they've got multiple ways they've been doing it since before the internet. So, I honestly understand the concerns and have no problems with people voting their conscience. But if you read the language, it's a very narrow exception. And if you're in a township with quite a few square miles and with the many different things going on, you can go from having 1 or 2 or 5 people that show up to the meeting being able to ask questions or get informed, to everybody in your township being able to contact you. And it's pretty straightforward to me, but I'm not going to make light of your concerns. I'm going to vote green because I've spent several years working to try and come up with some way that would allow people that care about obeying the law to not have a gag order on their communications with something that is the way we now talk and communicate with a vast number of our constituents. Thank you.
The member from Morrison, Representative Kresha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm just wondering if the author would yield for 2 quick questions.
He will yield. Representative Kresha.
Representative Freiberg, I'm curious, how would this affect if I had county commissioners that wanted to talk to me via social media? Would there be any concerns they would have if, say, 3 or 4 of them got together on a chat room and wanted to communicate directly to me?
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Krisha. It would depend on a couple of factors. It would depend if the number of county commissioners who are contacting you constituted a quorum. And secondly, it would depend if the issue they are discussing constitutes official business before the county. If it does constitute official business, then regardless, if they are a quorum and it does constitute official business, then regardless of whether or not this language passes, they will be violating the open meeting law.
Representative Krisha.
And thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for that answer, Representative Freiberg. So just so I understand, so if I have a couple of county commissioners that say want to get a hold of me about concerns about maybe the cost of the Senate office building or Minsur's rates on the county, they could contact me through this, and they may or may not be susceptible to the open meeting laws, but that's not necessarily clear in here. Is that correct?
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Krisha, I don't believe the Senate office building would constitute official business before your county board.
Any further discussion on the motion to concur? Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just in closing, I'd like to respond to a couple points that were raised here. Representative Hertos mentioned that it's appropriate to have a blog in for people to comment. I would just comment that under current law, if they do constitute a quorum, it's unclear under current law whether or not they would be subject to a charge of violating the open meeting law. So this just clarifies that. If they are discussing official business, regardless of whether or not this passes, that would be a violation regardless. Social media essentially is just one more public square. You know, the issue of giving names and addresses at council meetings was raised here. That's actually not required. You can't force people to disclose what their name and address is. Now, it's common practice in many cities and counties and township boards. It certainly was when I was on the city council for people to give their names and address, but you can't require them to do so. So the fact that this doesn't require them to do so in a social media setting, I don't really think is relevant. So I would, and it's certainly not common practice to give name and address if you talk to somebody at a parade, which is another public square. So I would encourage people to, as Representative Quam said, to vote green on this. Motion to concur. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If Representative Freiberg would yield to a question.
He will yield. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Freiberg, what happens in a situation where there is a question of whether the open meeting law has been violated? Does this now open this up so that the city council members or the county commissioners would have to open up their social media sites for public inspection?
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Anderson. Violations of the open meeting law are inherently fact-dependent situations. It depends on who was talking to whom and what they were discussing. So, you know, part of the reason I was using that rhetorical flourish that Representative Fabian objected to of saying I think occasionally is just because sometimes these are fact-dependent situations and come down to a decision by the court. Thank you.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So what we're saying here is, say if somebody makes the claim and they maybe have one citation that would link to city council members, then in effect what we're seeing is that the court could order the city council member or the county commissioner to open up their entire social media account for review by the court, and that would be available to the public then. I guess that's the question I have, and I assume that's the case.
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Anderson. I don't believe that's accurate. This language applies, Representative Quam, I thought, made this point pretty effectively. This makes discussions, you know, if you do allow this sort of discussion to happen via social media, it only applies when it's available to all members of the general public under the current language. So, in effect, these are inherently public. I don't think I'm sorry, I said I think. I used the word think there. You know, everything under it is already subject to public inspection.
Any further discussion on the motion to concur? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the motion. The clerk will close the roll. There being 71 ayes and 56 nays, the motion prevails, and the clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by the Senate.
Third reading, House File 2236, as amended by the Senate.
Third reading. Discussion on the bill. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 75 ayes and 52 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by the Senate and its title agreed to. Members were joined in the chamber today by a former Representative Nora Slawick from the Maplewood area. She represented Maplewood from 1997 to 2012.
Message from the Senate. This is the Atkins motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendment the concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File 3073, an act relating to insurance. Atkins moves that the House refuse to concur in the Senate amendments to House File 3073, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 3 members of the House to meet with a like committee appointed by the Senate.
Representative Atkins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning. This is my bill. It's actually now the Senate made a few changes to it. We like most of them, where there's a couple of them that still need a couple tweaks, and so we'd like to go to a conference committee. I'd appreciate member support.
On the motion to refuse to concur, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. Motion prevails. Announcement by the Speaker.
Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File 3073. Atkins, Fritz, McNamara.
Conference committee reports on House files.
Conference committee report. This is the Murphy E. report. House File 2180, the reports addressed to the Honorable Paul Thiessen, Speaker of the House, the Honorable Sandra L. Pappas, President of the Senate, we the undersigned conferees for House File 2081, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as followed. The report signed by all 3 conferees on the part of the House and all 3 conferees on the part of the Senate. Murphy E. moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File 2180 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by conference.
I recognize the author, Representative Murphy, who will explain the report.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. House File 2180, the conference report, it represents the negotiation between the House and the Senate on the Health Insurance and Transparency Act. We did make a couple of changes after a couple of weeks of negotiation with the Senate. First and foremost, we did change and I think improve the process for negotiation, both negotiation and the bidding process. So you'll recall that we had a process in the House bill. The Senate had a very different process, and what we agreed to was a spelled out process where the school districts are asked for 3 bids. Those 3 bids, or they're asked for 3 bids, whatever bids are submitted in private. The school district and up to 3 representatives from the bargaining units may look at those bids. The school district then enters into a negotiation with any of the bids to improve on either price or services offered. And then the bidders are able to submit again a sealed proposal. The school district, along with those 3 representatives, then open those bids. They become public, and after a 15-day window of analysis, the school district can proceed to sign a contract. The second change that we accepted in negotiation with the Senate was a change to the self-insureds and broadening the exemption. As you'll recall, we did not exempt the self-insureds in the House proposal. The Senate completely exempted the self-insureds in the House proposal, or in their Senate proposal, and what we agreed to was those school districts that have more than 1,000 lives will continue to get bids for their TPA services, but will not be required to get a PEEP bid. And for those school districts that are currently self-insured, they would follow that same process. For those, so we would grandfather those that are currently self-insured. They would need in the future to get TPA bids, but no PEEP bid. And for those school districts that do not meet either of those 2 categories in the future, they would get bids on TPA services and a PEEP bid if they choose to become self-insured. Those are the 2 significant changes. The bill represents, from my perspective, a very strong step toward transparency and accountability, using bidding to drive down costs for school employee health insurance, and I'd ask for your support. Thank you.
Discussion on the motion to adopt. The member from Hennepin, Representative Hertaus.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and would Representative Murphy yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative Hertaus.
Thank you. Representative Murphy, I apologize. There's a little loud chatter in the chamber here. There are, I'm advised, about 33 self-insured school districts in the state. And I heard you say something about 1,000. Could you clarify what you were saying about 1,000 as an exemption?
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Hertaus. I'm talking about a school district that has, their policy covers more than 1,000 lives.
Representative Hertaus. The member from Dakota, Representative Wills.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I have a question for the author, if she would yield.
She will yield. Representative Wills.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Murphy, I know you and I have talked about this bill, and I just have a question after this is coming back from the conference with the Senate and with the changes for the self-insured districts. I know previously the language was that they would have to go out and bid every 2 years, and wondering if that's still the process or if there's any leeway if they liked their plan that they already had, if they could have a contract for, say, 5 years before they go out and bid again, and if there's any clarification for that, please.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Wills, that part of the bill did not change. So as it was when we voted on it before, they seek a bid every 2 years unless there's an agreement between the school district and the exclusive rep to extend it up to 5 years, as is the current law.
Representative Wills.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Murphy, for that clarification. I'm going to look at the language a little more carefully just to follow what you're saying here, and I may have more questions later, but I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Murphy, if you'd yield to a question.
She will yield. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hertas had mentioned that there's 33 self-insured school districts. Can you tell me how many of those 33 self-insured districts meet that qualification of 1,000 or more employees?
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Anderson. You know, there has been, in the testimony that we got in the conference committee, different numbers about the number of districts that are self-insured. So as I understand it, most of the metropolitan self-insured districts are at that threshold of 1,000 lives or more, but not every one is, and that is why there are two moving pieces to the self-insured exemption. One is 1,000 lives or more, and that would be going forward so that if there is a district that is fully insured now but decides to become self-insured, and if they cover more than 1,000 lives, then they would in the future get bids on TPA services, but not a PEEP bid. And for those that are currently self-insured with less than 1,000 lives, they would be grandfathered into the bill or into the law going forward, so they would also get TPA bids, but no PEEP bid.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Murphy, given that information, do you have a spreadsheet then of the school districts that would be exempted from that, and then the school districts that would not be exempt from the PEEP bid process?
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Anderson, I have one in my bag that I would be happy to get a copy to you.
Representative Anderson.
And thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Murphy, if you yield to another question. So as I understand it, I've got two school districts that are self-insured, the Robbinsdale School District and then also the Wayzata School District. I'm assuming that they would both be exempt from this, but you're saying for the future, if the Osseo School District wanted to become self-insured, they can become self-insured, but they would be required to do the PEEP bid process.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Anderson, if you could repeat your question, I was interrupted just briefly there.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Murphy. So I have two school districts that are self-insured. They are kind of grandfathered into not having to do the PEEP bid process, and I'm assuming that's PEEP bid for everything, correct? And then also for the Osseo School District, they're currently not self-insured, but in the future, if they wish to become self-insured, you're saying that they would still have to go through the PEEP bid process. Is that correct?
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Anderson, that is correct.
Representative Anderson. Further discussion on the motion to adopt. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. No. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading, House File 2180 as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Discussion to the bill. The member from Fillmore, Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would just like to thank Leader Murphy for her efforts on this. I personally preferred the way it went off the House floor. We did not get our entire position, but after a couple weeks of negotiating, I think we came back with a bill that I will certainly support. And members, as far as I know, in the conference committee there was, I believe that all interested parties had no opposition to this bill. The conference committee took into consideration some concerns that some of the larger school districts had, and I think we've got a good bill here. We should put up a lot of green votes on this one.
The member from Pope, Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. Would the bill author yield for one quick question?
She will yield. Representative Anderson.
Majority Leader, one of the concerns expressed by one of my schools was the procedure that when the three bids come back and then negotiations can continue. Now I see a change was made to allow all three bids to continue negotiating, but it says in consultation with the union. Could you explain the process that the bidding would continue by the board, but in consultation with the union, please?
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Anderson. You'll recall when the bill came to us and we voted for it here, that the exclusive rep had, in the bidding process, the opportunity to consult with and make a decision with the school district about the two proposals that would go forward. in the course of the negotiation and coming up with a different means for bidding, we agreed that the school districts would retain the authority that they have, and as the negotiation is happening underway with the various bidders, that the school district would have the option to consult with, to talk with the exclusive rep, but the exclusive rep has no decision-making ability in that process. So consultation means to consult with, to talk with, to get information from, but not to make a decision.
The member from Sibley, Representative Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair and members. Would the Majority Leader yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative Gruenhagen.
Thank you, Representative Murphy. I know one of the claims about this, if I remember right when it went off the floor, was that this is going to result in lower costs on health insurance. But, my experience of the school board is we've always, on a regular basis, both with the unions, bid our health insurance. And the result was that everybody wanted to keep it competitive with the most benefits possible. And we didn't need any law to tell us. And we included PEEP bibs from time to time, although it never was competitive with the other bids that we got. So, we've got a system that allows local control, depends on the intelligence of the teachers union and the administration already, that produces, from my experience, the lowest cost with the best benefits. So why do we need this bill? Just refresh my memory. Why do we need this bill to micromanage that process? And how are we guaranteeing it's going to wind up with lower cost and more benefits when the input I've gotten from my local school districts in my district, this is going to increase their cost, not decrease it? Madam Speaker and Representative Murphy.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Gruenhagen. We, in this bill, are using the tools of transparency and competition, believing that it will drive down costs. If there are bids coming in, and in the end, the parties are able to see those bids in terms of informing their decision-making, we believe that that will give both the school districts and those involved a better opportunity to make a decision that is based on good information. And I think good information and sunshine are both good things in this process. I bet you agree. I really like your smile there. That's a good thing. I heard from somebody yesterday that their school district is just rounding up their negotiation on their health insurance, and they did seek a PEEP bid in that process, and as a result, they decided to retain, and remember the school district is the one that gets to make this decision, they retained their authority, but they retained the coverage that they had, but they got a 3.9% decrease in their premiums because of the entrance of the PEEP bid and the competition in comparison of those two things. So, I don't know that it's going to mean for every school district that kind of a competitive return, but I think it's a good idea that we try, that we give the school districts this option. We've worked very hard to make it uniform, depending on how the school districts operate. But basically, I think fundamentally to the bill is the idea of transparency and competition. I think we believe those things work, and we should apply it to this process to make sure that employee health insurance, school district costs, and property taxpayers are all reaping the benefit from those tools.
Representative Gruenhagen.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Majority Leader Murphy, for that response. But, I agree with a lot of the words you used in your response, but I disagree with the overall mandate of this bill. It's already happening. Again, 16 years on the school board, I never once encountered either teachers or staff or anybody else not wanting the lowest cost with the best benefits for the district. And we regularly attended that. We didn't need a mandate or law to tell us how to do it. And so, I give a lot of credit to local officials to do what's in their best interest along with the unions that they negotiate with. I think it's overall a good process, especially on health insurance, and to put this micromanagement of times and dates and when it has to be done is simply going to drive up the cost for the local school district in the process when they might not think it's needed, or they've found the best alternative already for themselves. So members, if you believe, and Representative Murphy, I just want to add one more thing. Thanks for all your work. This bill could be a lot worse than what it is, in my opinion, okay? And so I do appreciate that, sincerely, okay? And, but But I do have to vote red, and I have to urge members on both sides of the aisle. If you believe in local control, okay, we don't need this top-down micromanagement mandate of when, if, how, and but they have to go about it. They're perfectly capable of doing this. And I know maybe we get a few complaints here and there, but overall the process has worked done well, in my opinion. So please, members, vote red regardless of which side of the aisle we're on. All right? Thank you for your consideration, Madam Chair.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hertaus.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I would just like to point out that with all of the mandate that we're doing in this bill, it's not about who we're insuring, but it's about those individuals, and we should be concerned about those individuals who actually use the insurance. And when a school district entertains a bid for insurance, there may be cost and efficiencies involved with having a policy that's in place for more than 2 years. That saves the taxpayer money. And having a mandate of every 2 years, I think, is an unwise thing, particularly if you are a patient or a member of an insured's family who's undergoing a treatment plan, and you have your relationship with your provider and your doctor, and you're going to be subjected to having that interrupted every 2 years. Many people have long, ongoing conditions that require a treatment plan that's more than just a few weeks or a few months. And to subject them to having their insurance changed because of a state requirement where we're acting as an actuary trying to determine risk, I think is an unwise decision. And I think we ought to leave it in the local hands. And I think we ought to think about those folks that would have the economic certainty for planning the costs of the school district and the economic certainty for those people who are insured under those plans to know that their health care and their health plan isn't going to be subject to disruption every 2 years. So with that, I'd like you to consider that. And this is primarily the reason, even though there's been improvement in having the exemption for the self-insured districts, which I think is important, I'm going to be voting red because of this issue about every 2 years. Thank you.
Any further discussion to the bill? The member from Mille Lacs, Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the Majority Leader yield to a question, please?
She will yield. Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Murphy, I'm a little confused and frustrated by the fact that the sealed bids will be opened and negotiations can continue, yet there's a protection now under Chapter 13. So it seems to me it might be some kind of a guessing game to determine whether you want to continue negotiating to get the best deal in light of the fact that you have said this system is designed to reduce costs of insurance to our public employees. So how will this continue? Because I'm not sure with this new language now that was added.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Erickson. I appreciate your question. Let me explain the process one more time. The school district would seek 3 bids. The bids that come into the school district come to the school district, and a subset, those authorized by the school district and those selected by the exclusive rep together, would be able to look at those sealed bids, but that information is kept private under Chapter 13's business practices. So as the negotiation continues, if the school district makes the choice to negotiate, that the school district is negotiating with each of those parties individually, and not each party can't see each other's bid, right? So that's the point, is to keep that information private through the course of the negotiation with the district, and then those who have submitted bids can choose to submit a final proposal back to the school district. The school district and those 3 same designees then are able to open those. They're made public, as are the first bids, and then there's a short window of time for analysis before a contract would be executed. So the first window is done privately to protect the integrity of a negotiation. And in the end, the bids are opened and they're made public so that people can understand the course of what happened and the choice before them, before the school district.
Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Murphy. I still think that this is somewhat of a guessing game, and then with the 15-day window being the determination for decision-making, I'm not so sure that we have followed what I consider good business practice. I don't think we'd find the private sector operating this way. And so this is very concerning to me, and because I still have unanswered questions, I'm voting no.
Further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 78 ayes and 50 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference, and its title agreed to. Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 2268. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File 2268, an act relating to metropolitan transit.
The member from Dakota, Representative Masin.
Madam Chair, members, the Senate file is identical to the House File 2751. The Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee currently advises the Met Council on all fixed route service. However, the funding statute only said that they would provide advice on special transportation service, which to most of us means metro mobility. So what this bill does is makes the statute current with the practice that they're currently doing. It does two things. It adds the addition of the fixed route service to TAC, and then it also places this section under the statute dealing with Met Council advisory committees. It doesn't add any extra to the advisory committees' responsibilities. It simply brings the statute into current use. So again, Section 1 gives tax description, including the fact that they are dealing with all fixed route service, and then when it moves it into the advisory committee section, it makes it a better fit for that. And then Section 2 deletes TAC's old statutory location. And the bill is supported by TAC, Met Council, and the disability communities. I'd appreciate your support of this bill.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Loeffler is moving to amend Senate File 2268 as follows. The amendment is coded A2.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Well, my amendment basically puts a little more transparency and accountability in the process of doing light rail transit projects through Met Council. And as you know, there's been a big project that's been working its way through, affects my community and many others in this body. And regardless of what your thoughts are on light rail, I think whether you're for it or against it, you can certainly be for this amendment. Basically, two provisions in it. First of all, it says that before the Met Council could get to the preliminary engineering phase of a light rail project, obviously there's some pre-planning that goes into it, some proposed routes and environmental processes that are examined and some engineering in that area that's done. But before we get to preliminary engineering, which is a phase before municipal consent and then the final engineering, that there would have to be a vote of the legislature to approve the project. I think this would give much needed transparency and much needed approval and really authority for Met Council to move forward, knowing that a group of elected officials have had the chance to look at this project and give it the green light for the next phase. Southwest Light Rail, which is currently under consideration, is right now estimated to be about $1.6 billion. That could easily move forward higher in the cost category, but at $1.6 billion, they plan, Met Council has developed their plan for funding this project, that 10% of that would come from state funds. So that's $160 million. And if we're going to spend $160 million of state funds and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of other funds from CTIB, all of which has to have some kind of approval from this body, in my opinion, in order to have legitimacy of moving forward. You know, Met Council has the ability ultimately, and this references the second part, of overriding municipalities and other duly elected officials in this process. You know, right now they're going to go through the process of having presentations to each of the affected cities and seeking municipal consent. And there is a lot of controversy, especially over the pathway through an area of Minneapolis and also some other areas along the path, the proposed route. And if those city councils do not concur, do not offer municipal consent, Met Council currently does have the authority to move forward with the project. Now, I know that they will go back and try to offer amendments and adjustments to mitigate the concerns of those city officials, but ultimately they do have the power to move forward even if they don't get that approval. I think that's wrong. And a lot of the people that I've spoken to, not only from my district, but other areas in the Southwest Metro, have indicated they don't agree as well. I submitted an op-ed to the Star Tribune in September just talking about the process of how Met Council moves forward with these types of projects, and that there ought to be a vote on the line where somebody who actually has to stand for election has to cast a yes or a no on these things. And I think that's what people want. They're very frustrated when they come to you with concerns and questions, and you say, well, I understand, but I don't actually have a say in this. I can express an opinion, but I don't actually have the authority presented to me as your state representative to have a vote on this. So I would ask members to, again, support this really as a matter of good government, of keeping the process one that your voters, your constituents understand. They can come to you. You will have to weigh the project. Certainly we've got committees within the House and the Senate. The transportation committees could have hearings on this and have the Met Council come in when they get to the point in the process where they want to present their idea, present the concept, and have it then go to both the House and the Senate for approval before the next stages are taken. So, you know, I think, again, just to reiterate, people can have different ideas and different stances on transit and what the appropriate types of transit are going to be in our area and where light rail may or may not be appropriate versus other types of transit. But that's not what this is about. This is not whether or not you agree with light rail or not. The point of this is to saying along the way there should be votes and public, transparent, accountable votes by elected officials as to whether or not this light rail project should move forward. So I would ask members to vote in support of this amendment.
Discussion. The member from Hennepin, Representative Simon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Well, I respectfully urge a no vote. Respectfully, because I respect Representative Loeffler and I respect what she's trying to do in terms of transparency. I just happen to see it a little bit of a different way. I think, in effect, what this amendment would do, if enacted, would be a real killer of transportation and transit projects. Perhaps inadvertently, but I think that's what it would do. I know a little something about this because I represent 2 of the 5 communities through which the Southwest Corridor will run through, and there has been a give and take, to put it charitably, and downright disagreement and hostility, to put it uncharitably, between some of the communities when it comes to the routing of the freight line, and some folks have read about that here. But I'd be very cautious about giving absolute veto power to any one community over a project like this. I don't think we'd ever do this with a highway. I don't think we'd ever do this with a bridge. And I'd be very, very careful about creating the precedent to do that, because we know that even within communities, very loud voices often that might not necessarily represent the whole community can hold sway. I'm not saying whether that happened or didn't happen in this particular situation, but I'd just be very concerned about that. I think the current law does a good job of balancing the interests. It incentivizes the Met Council to deeply and thoroughly consult all the communities involved. There are real penalties for not achieving consensus, huge delays of weeks or months, and untold costs as well. So it's not as if the Met Council or anyone else can just bulldoze or override or overlook the concern of communities. So I think that's one thing that's important. And I worry that the language of the amendment would both give too much local control and yet not enough. Too much in the sense that it might empower sort of NIMBY factions in particular communities that might not have the regional benefits at heart. But it also might, in a sense, give too little power to local communities, in that there may be a string of local communities, 5 or 6 or more, that agree on a particular project, but if a hostile majority of people not from those areas in the Minnesota legislature didn't like the project, then those local concerns could be overridden. So, Representative Loeffler, I very much respect your involvement in these issues, and I know it's coming from a good place. I just think we don't see eye to eye on this, and I would respectfully urge a no vote.
The member from Washington, Representative Schoen. The member from Hennepin, Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, I would request a roll call on this amendment.
Representative Winkler requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Madam Speaker, members, this is actually a very strange amendment, because if it wasn't for the local units of government, CTIB, and the Metropolitan Council, we would really be nowhere on mass transit in the metropolitan region. And I know that there are those who have a fairly outdated, let's say 1950s view of mass transit in Minnesota, where you tear up all the tracks and you put everybody in buses and you get rid of, sort of the transit system we had and replace it with a car system that clogs people's lives with traffic. But that mindset is what is unfortunately predominant in the legislature. And without the local units of government being able to move these projects forward, we would be nowhere. So you're taking control away from the units of government who actually have shown a great deal of leadership in getting mass transit moving in the Twin Cities, and instead transferring it to a legislature which has shown an appalling lack of leadership on mass transit issues over the years. So I think that would be a big mistake. And as specifically to the Southwest Corridor project, that's a perfect illustration. You have the Hennepin County, you have Metropolitan Council, you have CTIB finding a way to get this project moving. You have the legislature taking the extreme view in the capital investment bill that we will fund transit as long as it's not Southwest Corridor. So we are really just kind of doubling down on this notion that transit's a bad idea for Minnesota, even though Representative Loeffler, I would point out that the 2 of the greatest champions of the Southwest Corridor project are the Twin West Chamber of Commerce and the Greater Minneapolis Chamber of Commerce. The business community is saying, build transit. We need it. We want it in our community. It helps create jobs. It helps connect people from their neighborhoods to jobs. It moves people. It's the way we're going to grow. It concentrates investment along transit lines so we don't have to get into the expense of building infrastructure farther and farther out. It creates choices for people in their daily lives and their commuting. It creates all kinds of economic growth in areas that are highly efficient. It's a good Republican conservative investment, just like it always has been. When you go back to the Republicans who created the Metropolitan Council in the first place, including the father of the current head of the business partnership, you can see that connection. It's been consistent over time. So I think if we were to vote yes on your amendment, Representative Loon, it would be a vote against the major transportation project funded by, supported by the business community, supported by residents of the state, and only lacking support in this legislature. So we're taking a good project, a good idea, a good investment, and turning it over to a decision-making body that doesn't recognize any of those things. So I would recommend a red vote.
Representative Schoen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And I just want to oppose the amendment. As a legislator from the East Metro, we've certainly struggled with competition for transit dollars in our area, and I know that's happened all over the state of Minnesota. However, as this is more focused on the 7-county metro area, I certainly see this would have a chilling effect on the future, as it would delay projects even further that we're trying to get accomplished in the East Metro, related even possibly to Red Rock and Gateway, and what those chilling effects could be on the business climate and the investments around those. So please vote no.
Representative Masin.
This amendment really makes substantial changes to the process, and I think it really needs to, this would be better going through the committee. So again, I strongly urge you to vote no on this amendment.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Runbeck.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I stand in support of the amendment. I think we're really big on process around here, and we like to hear from a lot of voices, as this particular bill indicates, a lot of voices, and yet when it comes to people who are immediately and directly impacted by projects such as light rail, we don't want to give them a voice. And I would imagine that for all the cities along that particular project line, or any particular project line, there may be unintended consequences and costly impacts that they're going to have to then react to. So I think that, and we do certainly allow communities now to take votes regarding road projects. So this would really extend that common practice to the area now of light rail. And I urge a green vote.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Earhart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Loon yield?
She will yield. Representative Earhart.
I'm wondering, Madam Speaker and Representative Loon, I had the opportunity when I entered the chamber to talk with Bob again Carney, Jr., who is proposing a Southwest Light Rail alternative. He says, I've developed a detailed alternative plan that uses metro mobility size buses, and lots of them instead of light rail. And he's asking everyone to sign a petition that would slow down the process or stop it, so while he has a chance to explain his new plan. Now, Bob is a perennial candidate, and he also has a fountain of new and innovative ideas. So I'm asking you if you signed his petition, because this is what this sounds like.
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Earhart, no, I don't believe so.
Representative Earhart.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I suggest that you might want to talk to him, because it may be an idea that would help your process here and what you're trying to project. But I think this is a bad idea and that we should vote red on it. Thank you.
Representative Loon.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the members who have gotten up to speak. And again, just to go back first to Representative Winkler's comments and then back to Representative Simon, and I appreciate the points that have been made. But again, this is not about anti versus pro light rail. This is again about the process. So, Representative Winkler, you are absolutely right. The Twin West Chamber and other business community organizations have expressed support of that, and they've communicated that to me, as I'm sure they have to several other of their elected officials. And that is appropriate. But at some point, elected officials should have to cast a vote on whether they want this project to go forward, especially if the Met Council is counting on a portion of funding, 10%, coming from the state funds. I don't know how that happens without the approval of the legislature. So before more time and effort is spent, let's have a vote that authorizes that process to move forward in a very transparent, public manner by people elected from their community to say, yes, we have vetted this project, we are approving it moving forward, and that draws a much clearer line for the electorate about then funding following that, if that's the plan, that a portion of funding is going to come from state taxpayers. That is appropriate, and that is a good part of the process. Some of the controversy, I honestly think, with light rail comes from the fact that people don't understand the process, and they wonder how one body that no one has elected has all of the control and all of the authority to even say that the state's going to put up 10%. Under what authority does the Met Council have to say that? So let's actually put a process in place that makes sense to the voters, makes sense to the affected communities. And if you look at my amendment, you know, light rail, the Southwest Light Rail, which is a current project on the books being debated, has already gone through preliminary engineering. So this would actually apply to any future projects that are brought forward. The latter part of the amendment talks about municipal consent, which is the process at which Southwest Light Rail is right now. And Representative Simon, you know, to your point about one community being able to hold that up, you know, I think there is plenty of leverage here on both sides, both from Met Council and from other folks that want this, and then the other communities along the line, that I still think that that sort of give and take pressure works well here. You're still talking about an entire city council from one community that would have to vote no. Obviously, you could still have some naysayers on it, but you're talking about an entire city council that would vote and to put this project in jeopardy. Again, I think it gives a good balance to elected officials to be able to work this out. I think there may be a little more working in earnest, if you will, with the Met Council to resolve some of these problems before it gets to the point of municipal consent. I know there's been efforts on this project on both sides, but you know, honestly, I think a couple of the proposals out there are ones that really weren't realistic from the start. But the fact that the Met Council does have the authority to override an elected city on this is very problematic. Because in addition to the CTIP money and the state money that goes into this, you know, each of the cities are going to have some responsibility for their own to their own taxpayers for some redevelopment and some other things that go along with the stops in their communities. So you're telling a city, even if it votes no, if the project moves forward, you're still going to be responsible for some of that funding and that spending. And I do not think that's right. And I think a lot of other people would agree that's not right as well. So let's vote for a process that makes sure there is approval by elected officials, and through that process we can be assured that all taxpayers, all voters, all interested parties have a voice in a way that is accountable. You can see how people vote and know how these projects come into existence. I would ask for a green vote.
The member from Wabasha, Representative Driscoski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I urge you to support Representative Loon's amendment. It's an amendment that begins to bring some sanity back to the runaway spending that we're seeing happening here with these transportation efforts by these unelected bodies. You know, members, this is very important. 36% of the motor vehicle sales tax goes to fund Metro Transit. On top of that, just as a primer or a reminder, the Hiawatha Light Rail line, we are subsidizing, the people of Minnesota are subsidizing at a rate of 56% of the operating cost. And that's after it's built. That's after it's built and the train's built and everything else. The North Star line, we're subsidizing that. The taxpayers of Minnesota are being forced, many of them against their will, to subsidize an unaffordable rail line at the rate of 81% of the costs to run it. Many of these people who are having to pay for this will never ride this thing. Ever. And now we see the newest train that runs east and west between Minneapolis and St. Paul. It takes 67 minutes to go from St. Paul to Minneapolis on the Green Line train. 67 minutes, and it's in today's paper. I'm told that if you take a car, actually the article continues, if you take a car, anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. And I was talking to Representative Erickson. She made the trip yesterday. It took her 11 minutes in her car. So, Representative Winkler, you think we're going back to the 1950s. What we see happening out here with these unelected bodies, they are taking us back to the 1850s with these electrified horse and buggy systems that won't even get you there dependably or at the rate that you need to get there. Members, bring some sanity back to this runaway train. The runaway train that goes at the speed of a horse and buggy and that is eating up the pocketbooks of Minnesotans everywhere. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion on the amendment, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 56 ayes and 73 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File 2268.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Representative Masin.
Again, members, getting back to my very simple bill, all it does is bring current practice into statute. I'd appreciate a yes vote.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I apologize, Representative Masin. I did try to stand up before you, and I didn't want to kind of break our understood protocol, but I did want to make a comment on the underlying bill. Members, as we look at this bill, if you look at the back page of the bill under Section 473.386, much of the language is already there and is being deleted in the bill on the back side of the bill, but instead what I see happening here is we are taking this this unit of government, this advisory committee, and we are expanding it into working in other areas. They're also going to advise the council on long-range plans, and they're going to advise on all aspects of fixed regular route, as well as the special transportation services, which I understood were is part of current law right now. So, members, what we're seeing here is an expansion, again, as we've seen come before us many times here this session, of government, a government structure in this particular bill. The way it is written, we have a government structure that is being used to advise other government structures. Our government is getting so big and cumbersome in our efforts to build it here, members, that we have one government structure advising other government structures. Members, our government is getting too big in our efforts to think that we're doing good upon others, many times in order to save them from themselves. And let's put a stop to this growth in government. Please join me in voting no. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 83 ayes and 46 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Conference Committee reports on House files.
Conference Committee report. This is the Brynaert motion. Conference Committee report on House File 2092, an act relating to motor vehicle. The report's addressed to the Honorable Paul Thiessen, Speaker of the House, the Honorable Sandra L. Pappas, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees on House File 2092, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report signed by all three conferees on the part of the House and all three conferees on the part of the Senate. Brynaert moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File 2092 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by conference.
I recognize the author, Representative Brynaert, to explain the report.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, House File 2092 passed off the House floor in early April. It's the bill authorizing a veteran's special motorcycle plate for our combat wounded veterans. It passed unanimously. It was heard in the Senate last week. The Senate put 2 additional provisions on it, so we went to conference over those provisions. In conference, we accepted the Senate provision that extended the bill to cover retired firefighters. There already is law governing firefighters' special plates, and this extends that to retired firefighters. There was an additional provision from the Senate that gave the Commissioner expanded authority over all special license plates decisions. We did not accept that provision. So with that, I would urge members to continue their support for this bill on behalf of our wounded warriors and their interest in having this special plate, and I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If the bill author would yield to a question?
She will yield. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And is there a fiscal note ascribed to this bill?
Representative Brynaert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Scott, the original bill had a fiscal note between $500 and $1,000 for the process of setting up the computer printer that would actually issue the plates. It says in the bill that it's for the design, but the design is already accomplished. I actually have a sample plate, so it should be a minimal cost.
The member from Blue Earth, Representative Cornish.
Well, Madam Speaker, members, I just urge a green vote on this. I have a bunch of 3 wounded vets that contacted Representative Brynaert and myself. Would like to have been here today. They're excited about the bill and hope for a green vote. And thank you very much, Representative Brynaert, for working on this.
The member from Stearns, Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the author yield to a question, please?
She will yield. Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Brynaert, thank you for expanding this to talk about retired firefighters. Just a couple of clarifications. This is going to be for all plates, including motorcycle plates, that this retired firefighter plate is going to be available?
Representative Brynaert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative O'Driscoll, yes. In current law, the firefighter's plate is in all forms, for cars, motor vehicles, and motorcycles, and so those same forms would be extended to retired firefighters.
Representative O'Driscoll. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've actually been contacted by a few people from my district regarding this who may be retiring as firefighters. How would that affect them if they went from active firefighting to retired firefighters? Would they be required under the bill to surrender their firefighter plates and secure retired firefighter plates, or what's the anticipated transition on that?
Representative Brynaert.
Madam Speaker, Representative O'Driscoll, they do have to retire their current plates as active firefighters. That's actually a safety issue. Because those who have an active firefighter's plate are allowed on the scene of a fire, and so therefore the plate will be differentiated for retired firefighters. So if they wish to continue to have a firefighter's plate, they do need to make that switch.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. One final question, if the author would yield.
She will yield. Representative O'Driscoll.
I thank you for the clarification on that, but one point that I'm still a little confused on is if I move from active firefighter to inactive or retired firefighter, I would be required at that time to surrender the plates because we do renew our licenses on our tabs once a year. So I may have had a January renewal, retire in February, and now my question is, do I have to incur the cost with the Department of Public Safety again to reissue plates?
Representative Brynaert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative O'Driscoll, I'll tell you honestly that this was Senator Tomassoni's provision in the Senate, and if I had carried it, I would know more of those details, but I will do my best to answer this. My understanding is that because of the safety factor, currently active firefighters are required to surrender those plates immediately upon retirement so that they would not inadvertently be given access to a fire scene. Then it's their choice whether they want to continue with the special plate. They may return to a normal license plate on their vehicle, but if they want to continue with that special plate, they do have to reapply.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Madam Speaker, just one final comment to the body. I can tell you that I have heard from 3 or 4 people in my district recently on this, and as this starts making its way through the different communities and the firefighters, you may hear about it as well. So I'm hoping that there's clarification because you may be hearing from constituents as to having to surrender plates and pay the fees again for the retirement plates. And I do encourage members to vote yes on this bill, but I do want it from a public policy standpoint to have members at least consider that because you will probably be hearing, as I have, from members in your district. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion to adopt? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading, House File 2092 as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Any further discussion? The member from Washington, Representative Detmer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Brynaert, for bringing it forward. I know it was discussed in our military action group. I would like to have seen it just stay as it was when it first came through the House. I know that with the addition of different parts of the bill might make it a little more confusing for our communities, but again, I encourage a green vote.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 129 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to.
Conference report. This is the Simonson motion. Conference could report on House File 2446, an act relating to public safety. The report's addressed to the Honorable Paul Thiessen, Speaker of the House, the Honorable Sandra L. Pappas, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees for House File 2446, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report signed by all 3 conferees on the part of the House and all 3 conferees on the part of the Senate. Simonson moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File 2446 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by conference.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Simonson, to explain the report.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is the synthetic drugs bill that we passed off the House floor, 130 to 0 here a few days back. And I'm pleased to announce that upon the work of the Conference Committee that we brought back a bill that was very similar to our original bill that we started in the beginning of this process. The bills that we had in conference were very similar. The Senate's version did not include two of our what we consider to be very key provisions, one being funding for a statewide public awareness campaign about the dangers of synthetic drugs, especially targeting middle school and high school students, and two, a provision that was brought forward by Representative Loeffler about mandatory restitution for individuals convicted of selling these particular synthetic drugs. So the conference committee was able to secure those two provisions, and in doing so we also brought back to you a provision from the Senate bill that deals with emergency rulemaking authority for the Board of Pharmacy. Some of you will probably remember that in 2011 the legislature passed new legislation giving the Board of Pharmacy some emergency and expedited rulemaking authority to address new components and new drugs and new things that came on the market while the legislature was not in session. That provision was put into place in 2011. It required ratification by the legislature when they came back into session, and it was set to expire in 2014. The provision that we accepted from the Senate allows that emergency rulemaking authority to continue. It takes away the legislative ratification, and it does away with the expiration date. So that essentially explains what's in the report. I would stand for questions and would hopefully encourage a green vote.
Any discussion to the report? Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I just want to rise in support of this concurrence, and I want to thank Representative Simonson for allowing me to be on the conference committee, and I agree that we really got some great provisions, and thankful that the House position remained over the restitution and the rulemaking. So thank you again, and urge you all to vote green.
Any further discussion on the motion to adopt the report? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading, House File 2446, as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Discussion to the bill. Representative Simonson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I just want to take a moment to thank the members of the Select Committee that worked over the interim to travel around the state, research this issue, and put this bill together. Representative Loeffler, of course, Representative Newberger, Representative Schoen, and Representative John Ward and myself put a lot of effort into this, and we appreciate everyone's support over the session here, and we look forward to getting this into law. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 129 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to.
Conference Committee report. This is the Loeffler motion. Conference Committee report on House File 1863, an act relating to state government. The reports addressed the Honorable Paul Thiessen, Speaker of the House, the Honorable Sandra L. Pappas, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees for House File 1863, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report signed by all three conferees on the part of the House and all three conferees on the part of the Senate. Loeffler moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File 1863 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by conference.
I recognize Representative Loeffler, the author, to explain the report.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is the bill that discontinues many advisory councils and establishes expiration dates for others. The provisions adopted in the Conference Committee primarily were focused on technical differences and making sure that the bill didn't conflict with other bills that are actively moving through the legislative process. And would appreciate your support.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And would Representative Loeffler yield to a couple questions?
She will yield. Representative Pepin.
Thank you. Representative Loeffler, there are just a couple provisions I wanted to check with you on. My understanding is that before, in your bill, we'd repeal the Northeast Minnesota Fund Technical Advisory Committee, and the conference report put that back in, so added that committee back. Is that true?
Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Pepin. Yes, that was not a committee that was actually reviewed by the Legislative Commission on Planning and Fiscal Policy. This is their work, represents their work, and one of the committees in the House added that in, but the Senate did not have a chance to review it, and did not have a chance to discuss it with the people who were involved with it. So we discontinued this one, and we'll pursue. The Senate will pursue it in next year.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Loeffler, what about the Correctional Site Facilities Task Force that you had removed in your bill? Is it now back in, and we put that back into force again?
Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Pepin. That is one that, once again, we would try to not address bills that were moving forward, and our understanding was that there was a Senate file that was moving forward that had a responsibility related to that. I can't remember if it was exactly related to things related to MSOP or other things, but there was something going through the Senate, and so we felt like that bill should be dealt with by the experts in that subject area.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Loeffler. And then I know the House, I believe, had this in before, and the Senate, I thought, had the wiser move to repeal it, but it looks like we took the House position. What exactly does the Nuclear Waste Council and Emergency Energy Assistance Council do, and when do they meet?
Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Pepin. That group actually does not meet. It is only authorizing statute that says if there is a proposal to locate these nuclear waste within Minnesota, that this would be the group that would be convened to understand that proposal and start accumulating research related to the impacts on Minnesota. Because there is, as we discussed on the House floor, discussion of now solid rock-based storage, and the Upper Midwest Great Lakes Commission, of which we are a member, is actually actively studying that. There was a feeling that we should just allow the authority to remain in statute. It is not appointed. It does not meet. It's just an authority, so that if something were proposed a month after we adjourn session, that we would have a group of state agencies who are authorized to start looking at and gathering the research related to that. So we'd be ready to deal with it when we came into session.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I would support the Senate position on getting rid of things that we don't need. Representative Loeffler, just for my understanding, this bill now, as it is, it extends 11 councils, boards, and committees. So it extends the sunset. Is that accurate?
Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Pepin. This represents a whole variety of statuses. We repeal about 30. We extend, for those who did not have expiration dates, we establish expiration dates in statute, and we are providing that the Legislative Commission on Planning and Fiscal Policy will, every 2 years, review all of these again, so that there will be an ongoing review on all of these. On the specific number of 11, I would have to go through my notes and count things up, but I don't know that exact number.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I believe that from my count, that we extended 11 councils, boards, and committees. Representative Loeffler, you said something about repealing a number of agencies, 30-something, 37 agency advisory groups. How many of those advisory groups were actually meeting? In other words, how many of those are active? And then also, just refresh the body on how much money this saves the state if we were to pass this bill.
Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Pepin. These advisory groups, to answer your last question first, most of them do not have a budget. These are volunteers throughout our state and with specialized expertise who lend that to the state and to our state agencies and voluntarily attend meetings. There are some categories that are in statutes based on their workload, some that have a per diem, the $55, which usually doesn't cover lost lost wages for most of the professionals who serve to come into St. Paul or wherever these groups are meeting. And so the fiscal impact of discontinuing groups that have not been meeting is very, very minor, and extending the work of groups that still are performing a useful purpose is already in the state agency budgets. The advisory committees that we dealt with that are continuing are ones that were every single one of the 162 groups, and she's not on the floor here, but I really would like to give a shout out to Representative Mary Liz Holberg, because she was one of the 4 legislators, along with Representative Thiessen, who actually went through the survey results of all 162 of these groups. When did they have their last meetings? What were their last recommendations? Who are their membership? How many people attend? I mean, they had to fill out a fairly extensive report on whether or not they were active, how active were they, what are they doing, and this bill represents the recommendations of that advisory group as reviewed by the full legislative commission and as reviewed by 9 separate committees in the policy process and then assembled together. And so every single one of the groups identified how many times they have met and how frequently, and the ones that are being continued are ones where the state agency said they are actively using the advice that they're getting from this group.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And that was a long sentence, but what was the number, if you could just give me a number, of how many active boards, agencies, or committees this bill will eliminate or repeal?
Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Pepin. I believe it is 30. And so that is, and then there are others that may be discontinued in some other groups, but that is as I recall, the final number.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Loeffler, when you say 30, do you mean 30 boards, agencies, or councils that are currently meeting?
Representative Loeffler.
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, I didn't quite hear that question.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Loeffler. When I said active, when I asked you about how many of them are active boards, agencies, commissions, I'm wondering how many of them are actually currently meeting that you're eliminating. In other words, you said I think you said 37 or 30 or something. How many of them are actually currently meeting?
Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Pepin. The majority of these actually were meeting, but they weren't meeting real frequently, and many of them had been established to advise on the setup, for example, of a new program or initiative. And then when that program was up and running, they would get together maybe once a year or twice a year to give feedback to the agency. We just felt the agencies can get feedback in other ways. And so we're discontinuing ones that were actively meeting, but their main original purpose had really been achieved. And so most of these groups had been appointed. They were established in law. We were continuing recruitment for members, but we really felt that their mission had been accomplished and that there was no need to have that much effort being done. The vast majority of these were actively appointed and engaged, but their main work had been done, and we felt that there were other ways for our executive advisory committees, agencies to get information and feedback from the public.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Loeffler. I appreciate that. If boards, agencies, and commissions, committees are meeting after their legislative authority runs out, that's really troubling to me, and that tells me that we should all be careful when we introduce legislation for these groups, that we have a sunset. I know, Representative Loeffler, that the reason some of these are extended is because they were supposed to be sunset. I know 2009 was 1 year when a number of them were supposed to sunset, but they never did. They were still meeting against legislative direction, and that's very troubling. So I'm disappointed that all of those are extended, even though they've been meeting 5 years past the time they were supposed to sunset. So I think that tells us we all need to be very vigilant in not only putting sunset dates in our legislation, but going back. And while I don't think this is a bad bill, because if Representative Loeffler is accurate that some of these groups are still meeting, they ought not be meeting against our authority. So I appreciate that. I don't like the fact that 11 of them have been extended. And I think mostly what this bill did, it was an exercise of spending a lot of taxpayer money on per diems and staff time to go through the statute books and eliminate some lines. And so I'm hoping next year when we go forward on this, that what we do is perhaps put a reviser's bill together that will tell us if anything has changed or anything needs to be taken out of statute, as opposed to wasting a whole lot of staff time and member time to come in here and take words out of a statute book. But Representative Loeffler, I appreciate your time and your work on this. Today I'll be voting no, but I know you worked hard on it, so thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Kahn.
Madam Speaker, actually Representative Pepin asked one of my questions, which was the issue of what was happening with the nuclear task force. We have different opinions on that. I think that when people are seriously discussing putting nuclear waste in Minnesota from maybe anywhere in the country, we really need to be vigilant and ready to get on it. So I thank Representative Loeffler for keeping that in the bill. The issue that Representative Pepin just raised about the expiration of task force and reports, I would like us to have standard language that whenever we convene a task force whose job is to issue a report, that we also in the language have, or maybe we could just have generic language anywhere in the statute, that after the beginning of the next legislative session, that we want the task force around if it's to report to the legislature. We'd like it to be available to do that. But given an opportunity to report to the legislature, I think we ought to have an automatic expiration date so that we don't have to go back and keep finding these things that, even though their sunset date might have been the next year, that they actually have completed their work early, they've done everything they're supposed to do, and we should have an automatic closure of them at that time. I don't have an amendment now, obviously, and it's something for us to think about in the future.
The member from Sherburne, Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Loeffler yield for a quick question?
She will yield. Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Loeffler, just a quick point of clarification here. I see that, according to the conference report, that you are not repealing the Commuter Rail Corridor Committee, which specifically addresses the North Star Commuter Rail. I see that the Senate had repealed that Rail Corridor Committee. However, in the House position that it was not, so I just wanted to make sure that you would clarify that the North Star Commuter Rail, Corridor Committee is still part of this, that this extends the life of that, correct?
Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Newberger. Yes, that's correct. This is continued in the committee process when this went through. It was discussed how there is still active work to be done to increase the ridership on that, as well as communities who are asking for consideration for extension of it. And it was felt that this was still an appropriate place to have those discussions. And so it was continued to continue that, have a place to focus those discussions.
Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to get that clarified. Thank you.
Any further discussion on adoption of the report? Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, members, and I see that Representative Holberg is here, and I just wanted to personally, again, thank her for her work on this, and to ask all of you to support this, what I consider my spring house cleaning bill. And given the discussion, I'd like to have a roll call vote.
Roll call being requested. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you very much.
The clerk will take the roll on adoption of the report. The clerk will close the roll. There being 98 ayes and 31 nays, the motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading, House File 1863, as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Discussion to the bill. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 103 ayes and 26 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to.
Conference Committee report. This is the Sawatzky's motion. Conference Committee report on House File 2214. An act relating to transportation. The report's addressed to the Honorable Paul Thiessen, Speaker of the House, the Honorable Sandra L. Pappas, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees for House File 2214, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report signed by all three conferees on the part of the House and all three conferees on the part of the Senate. Sawatzky moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File 2214 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by conference.
I recognize Representative Sawatzky to explain the report.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. This is the Department of Transportation housekeeping bill, and we went to the Conference Committee, and as there were a few items that we needed to discuss, some of the things that the Senate brought over to help us with was naming the bridge on Highway 60 over the Mississippi River in Wabasha, the Michael Dwayne Klinkner Memorial Bridge. We also moved that we exempted the covered farm vehicles from spot check inspections by state patrol troopers. And then we also adopted a provision that mandates that the new legislative office building parking ramp be financed through user fees. And we adopted language that MnDOT created a general purpose lane instead of a dynamic shoulder lane during their rehab work on I-494. Some of the things that we did not adopt were looking at the Traffic Safety Educational Diversion Pilot Program. There was great support for on both sides of this issue, and we came to the conclusion that it wasn't ready for us to continue with this in this bill, but there was a lot of conversation and interest in working on this over the interim to look at this program and see how we could better meet the needs of the state of Minnesota. We also did not adopt changes to bicycling rules, and also we did not adopt language for new weight limit exemption for hauling liquid waste. And also we there was in this provision where the Rochester House File 3172 facility in Rochester is a maintenance facility in Rochester would be in the supplemental bill. And so, members, I appreciate your support on this bill.
Discussion to adoption of the report. The member from Dakota, Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move that the House refuse to concur with this Conference Committee report on House File number 2214 and that the bill be returned to the conference committee and ask for a roll call.
Representative McNamara moves to refuse to adopt and requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is as much a no-brainer as when the original vote was that passed off this House floor with broad bipartisan support. I sent an email to the three conferees last Friday afternoon to explain Representative Hornstein's and my amendment and the fact it had a drafting error, and attached the proposed amendments to fix it in conference committee. Madam Speaker, I'd wonder if Representative Sawatzky would yield for a question.
She will yield. Representative McNamara.
Representative Sawatzky, what was the vote on the motion to accept the amendments I had drafted to you that were the correction for the drafting error on the amendment that passed the House?
Representative Sawatzky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative McNamara, we did not vote on that provision. I do want to explain a little bit about that part of this issue. MnDOT and the Association of Minnesota Counties are we're not in agreement with this amendment, but they were very willing to look at this issue over the interim and work together and to study it a little bit further in the future. But at this time, they were not happy with the amendment and were willing to work with it over the summer and the fall.
Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Wondering if Representative Sawatzky would yield for another question.
She will yield. Representative McNamara.
Representative Sawatzky, can you clarify, MnDOT testified that they were opposed to this amendment?
Representative Sawatzky. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and Representative McNamara. They did oppose this amendment, and part of it, members, is that right now the limit for carrying the truck weight is 20,000 pounds, and what this amendment was to increase it up to 26,000 pounds of liquid waste. And part of the conversation was at the beginning of after the spring thaw and the road conditions, that this extra weight on our roads, in our parks, on probably not as well-traveled roads or supported roads where you would go and essentially this is the porta potty amendment, and so it is probably not. It is not good for our roads, and especially some of our secondary roads. And so it was under those circumstances that this was not good for our roads in the state of Minnesota. And we all know that our roads are deteriorating, and we need to look at a very comprehensive transportation bill next year. And so I would hope that maybe that will fall under these to help you out with your amendment, Representative.
Representative McNamara.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Representative Sawatzky, you didn't offer my amendment that fixed the drafting error. MnDOT was opposed to the way it passed off the House with the drafting error that was in the amendment that Representative Hornstein and I offered. They were not opposed to the amendment with the correction. I dealt with everybody, sent three conferees an email at 2:42 on Friday afternoon that acknowledged that the counties were the only one that were still opposed, and I believe the word mildly would be correct to put in their opposition. MnDOT, the Association of Cities, Micah, and the townships in my conversations were all neutral on the issue. This is an exemption that was more narrowly drafted than the one we do for garbage trucks. It had a strong bipartisan support on the House floor, and the amendment to correct the drafting error didn't get offered by any of the three conferees, even though I sent it to all three of you on Friday afternoon. And it's my understanding the only one that testified was the counties, and the counties acknowledged that the way the bill was written was the intention of the author, and you all three had the correction for it. I don't understand why nobody on the conferee from the House side, when you had a strong bipartisan support, offered the amendment that would have corrected it and had a fair vote up or down on a bill that never got a hearing. I asked for a hearing. This is a simple, common sense thing that would only allow the small porta potty trucks under 26,000 pounds to get an exemption and actually clean the toilets in our parks and our construction sites within municipalities. This is common sense legislation that got railroaded. For what reason, I don't understand. Members, please vote yes.
Any further discussion on the motion to refuse to adopt? The member from Hennepin, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Sawatzky yield?
She will yield. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Sawatzky, can you tell me a little bit more about Section 25 of your bill?
Representative Sawatzky.
Madam Chair, thank you, Representative Anderson. Section 25, the parking ramp.
Representative Anderson.
What specific question would you like me to answer?
Madam Speaker, Representative Sawatzky, can you tell me about what that provision does? Can you walk me through that, please?
Representative Sawatzky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Anderson. This part of the provision is talking about helping the users of the parking lot of the new constructed parking lot with the new building, legislative building, will be helped with the user fees, just like we do right now in around the Capitol grounds for user fees with the parking lot to help defray the costs.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Sawatzky, who will be parking in this parking ramp?
Representative Sawatzky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Anderson. First of all, this by using the having the parking fees, by using our parking user fees, will help reduce the taxpayers for this building also, but also the members will be using the parking lot ramp.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Sawatzky, will the public be able to park in this parking ramp?
Representative Sawatzky.
Madam Chair, Representative Anderson, it will be used for the ADA parking ramp for users with disabilities.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Sawatzky, perhaps you didn't hear me. Will the public, and when you're talking about those individuals with disabilities, are these people from the public? Are these staff? Are these senators? Who will be parking in this ramp? Could you please be clear on that?
Representative Sawatzky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Anderson, yes, all of the above.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Sawatzky. So what we're saying here is that not only are we going to be asking the taxpayers of Minnesota to be funding a $90 million legislative office building that's not needed, but now we're going to say those folks that have to park in this parking lot, they're going to have to pay for it on top of that. Correct? Representative Sawatzky, could you yield to that question, please?
She will yield. Representative Sawatzky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Anderson. You know what? I personally haven't been around to all the parking ramps around the Capitol, but I do know that when my constituents come in, they always ask, what do I do about parking so I can come up and see what's going on at the Capitol. And I do know that there are meters, street meters, that our constituents put money into when they come into the Capitol, and I believe that you can get a user fee at the Sears parking lot, and so I think our constituents around the state of Minnesota are in some way, shape, or form paying somehow to pay on the streets around the Capitol.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. But Representative Sawatzky, what you're doing in effect is you're displacing them because their parking was provided for prior to this. And now you're saying to them, not only are they going to have to pay $90 million in taxpayer funds for a building that's not needed, but you are advocating that they also pay additional dollars for the parking that was already provided to them prior to this. So you're double dipping, double hitting the folks that can afford it the least. And I just want to make that point and ask you to support Representative McNamara's motion. Though I have an important provision in this bill, I think that by you having this piece in here, you're just loading on to more of the $90 million Senate office building, which is clearly not a priority for the citizens of Minnesota.
Further discussion on the motion to refuse to adopt? Seeing none, the member from Scott, Representative Albright.
Madam Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
State your parliamentary inquiry.
Madam Speaker, would you remind the body what a green vote would mean in a refuse to adopt?
A green vote would agree with Representative McNamara's motion to refuse to adopt the conference committee report. If there's a majority of green votes, the conference committee report would go back to conference. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the motion. The clerk will close the roll. There being 54 ayes and 74 nays, the motion does not prevail. We are back on the motion to adopt the conference committee report. Any further discussion? Representative Sawatzky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask for a roll call.
Representative Sawatzky requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. The clerk will take the roll on the motion. The clerk will close the roll. There being 83 ayes and 46 nays, the motion prevails, and the clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
A third reading, House File 2214, as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Discussion to the bill. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 111 ayes and 19 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to.
Conference report. This is a Laine motion. Conference Committee report on House File 2166, an act relating to elections. The reports addressed to the Honorable Paul Thiessen, Speaker of the House, the Honorable Sandra L. Pappas, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees for House File 2166, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report signed by all three conferees on the part of the House and two of the three conferees on the part of the Senate. Laine moves that the report of the Conference Committee in House File 2166 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by conference.
I recognize Representative Laine, the author, to explain the report.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, with this bill, jurisdictions can choose to use electronic rosters in 2014 for same-day registration or for pre-registered voters signing in, or both. They will need to buy their own electronic rosters because there isn't any money in this bill to help them as we had originally intended, but some will, and the Secretary of State will then do a report about their experience. That's it. A good bill. Please vote yes.
Any discussion to the adoption? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by the Conference Committee.
Third reading, House File 2166, as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Discussion to the bill. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to.
This is the Dill motion. Conference Committee report in House File 2852, an act relating to natural resources. The reports addressed to the Honorable Paul Thiessen, Speaker of the House, the Honorable Sandra L. Pappas, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees on House File 2852, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by all three conferees on the part of the House and all three conferees on the part of the Senate. Dill moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File 2852 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by conference.
I recognize Representative Dill to explain the report.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is the game and fish bill that we passed off the floor 130 to 0. And we had some issues that we worked out in the Conference Committee. It wasn't a particularly complicated Conference Committee. Resolved issues on discharging firearms near a stockade, which was a Murphy problem. Representative M. Murphy that we worked out for her. We had a negative position on the Muskie amendment of Representative Isaacson's when it left the floor, but we were able to come to a compromise where not all parties were perfectly satisfied, but everyone walked away without indigestion. And that is in the bill. Another provision that we accepted in the bill was to use crossbows during the bear, turkey, and deer season, and for taking rough fish for people over 60 years old. That was a provision that was resolved in the bill. There were some technical issues that were purely technical that were resolved in the bill. And then Representative Isaacson had a bill, two amendments that he passed regarding the wolf and record keeping and posting on the website, and one for restitution. The restitution item was removed in the Senate bill. And so it came back to Conference Committee with only one of the two provisions that we adopted in the House. We were able to work out some slightly different language which accomplished the same thing and actually made it better. the language better in the end. And so that was adopted, and so now in the bill are the two provisions that Representative Isaacson had requested for future information on wolves. And with that, I'd ask that you support the bill. It's a good bill, and that is my motion.
Any discussion on the motion to adopt the Conference Committee report? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading, House File 2852 as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Discussion to the bill. Representative Dill.
I'll be glad to answer any questions. Otherwise, appreciate your support.
Any discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 129 ayes and 1 nay, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to.
Conference Committee report on House File 2733, the Dill motion. House File 2733 relating to natural resources. The reports addressed to the Honorable Paul Thiessen, Speaker of the House, the Honorable Sandra L. Pappas, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees on House File 2733, report that we have agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by all three conferees on the part of the House and all three conferees on the part of the Senate. Dill moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File 2733 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by conference.
I recognize the author, Representative Dill, to explain the report.
And thank you, Madam Speaker. This is the DNR policy bill that we passed on the floor some time ago, went to conference. We resolved a few issues that were slightly different than each other. It adopted the word invasive carp rather than the term that was generally recognized as the term for carp that come up the Mississippi River particularly, that we don't want. And also we made changes to some drainage inspector regulations, very minor. This was a Hansen provision, some Fisher provisions in groundwater management. Then there was an amendment that came onto the bill regarding a closed landfill that wanted to enter into the closed landfill program in Goodhue County. That was a Schmidt provision in the Senate and a Senate-only provision. If you'll remember that Kelly amendment to this bill failed by 2 votes here on the floor, as I remember. Something like 65-64, was that the number? But anyway, it was not adopted in the House, and we picked it up in the Senate, and now it is in the bill. And if you have a question, maybe Representative Kelly would like to speak to that for a minute. I think one other member does that I know of.
The member from Goodhue, Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, and thank you, Representative Dill, for being willing just to listen and walk this through. And actually, we took this up on the House floor, and it actually passed. So we did pass it certainly with bipartisan support. This provision will allow for certainly a promoting of more recycling in our area. It does get a closed landfill that's been closed, majority of it closed for about 10 years, so that is positive as well. So there was really very concerted effort in several entities, including the PCA, the county, and our local city, in all working together for the last 5 years to get this result. So we certainly appreciate your support here on the House floor and appreciate the conference committee. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Wagenius.
Yes, thank you, members. I am standing to speak about the landfill. For those of you who like to talk about your taxpayers, this is where you need to pay attention, because this is supposedly a policy bill, but took on a financial liability for your taxpayers. The landfill in question here, we have no idea what's in it. We have no idea what it's going to cost to close it. We have no idea what it's doing to groundwater or what it might do in the future. We just have no idea, and we have no idea because the bill was never heard in a committee in the House, and there was no fiscal note on the bill. So, what this bill does is take on the responsibility of paying for this landfill, and it's your taxpayers who are going to pay without having any clue about what the cost is going to be. So let me tell you a little bit about the closed landfill program. That was done in the 1990s when we didn't know who was responsible for a landfill. They were old, they were leaking, the people who owned them, who had put things in them, had long gone. So the state took them over. And at that time, we said anybody from then on, that was in the 90s, then on, if they decided to do a landfill, they would be responsible for the costs of cleanup, of taking care of them. That's called the responsible party. That's the liability law that permeates our statutes. But in this case, we're taking it on in this bill, in a policy bill, no hearing, no fiscal note. And members, I can't vote for this. It sets a terrible precedent for taxpayers.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just want to clarify a couple of things. Actually, this did have a hearing about 5 years ago, the first year I was here, where we walked through it, and that's why I said we were working on this for about 5 years. As far as the financial liability, one of the requirements also is that the $1.8 million of financial assurance money that the county has does go to the state. So actually, just wanted to clarify that there certainly is compensation to the state in this regard, and again, thank you for your support.
Representative Wagenius.
Yes, there's financial assurance, but the question is, does it pay the bill? And the answer is probably not. But frankly, we don't know.
Further discussion on the motion to adopt. Representative Dill.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And you're right, Representative Kelly. I had the votes swapped, 66-65, and it was bipartisan. I believe I was the bipartisan part of that vote, as I remember. And I still support this, and I know that I've researched this quite a bit, and I still support this, and I ask you to support the bill in general with it in there.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I am in strong agreement with Representative Wagenius' concerns about closed landfills. But I also have a concern on bottom of page 33 and the top of page 34, where we talk about designating all of this waste going to a resource recovery facility, which I would believe would be a garbage incinerator. And we have had a good, robust discussion about recycling and recycling goals in the legislature this session, and I hope we can continue to do that. And unfortunately, we're falling short on recycling. We're not maximizing our organics composting. We're not doing a good enough job in source reduction, reducing the waste, packaging, this whole set of issues that work well for our economy and our environment by preventing the waste from going to landfills and incinerators in the first place. So to have this in statute, I think, is troubling because we need to be going in the other direction towards the top of the hierarchy for waste management. So I just wanted to call that to the members' attention, and it would be my hope that this county in this situation can really work hard to maximize recycling and composting and not put in this type of language in statute.
Further discussion on adoption. All those in favor of the motion to adopt, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading, House File 2733 as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Discussion to the bill. Representative Dill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for considering the bill. Thank you for voting on it.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 106 ayes and 24 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to. If there is no objection, we will revert to messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. This is the Atkins motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the Senate has concurred in and adopted the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File 2466, an act relating to public safety. The report's addressed to the Honorable Sandra L. Pappas, President of the Senate, the Honorable Paul Thiessen, Speaker of the House. We, the undersigned conferees, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by all three conferees on the part of the Senate and 2 of 3 conferees on the part of the House. Atkins moves that the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File 2466 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by conference.
I recognize the author, Representative Atkins, to explain the report.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is the cell phone tracking bill. I want to thank Representatives Lesch and Cornish for their service on the Conference Committee. It's Senator Brandon Peterson is the chief author in the Senate, and I want to thank him as well. All of the parties that care about it are cool with the language that includes law enforcement and the privacy advocates. You'll recall that it went out of here with a probable cause order. It's come back with a tracking warrant. There's also the notice provision and the report provision that came through the House. The problem that we're facing with respect to this issue is that people are just shocked when they find out that the government can actually track them and their location using their cell phone and the location device within that cell phone without probable cause, without getting a warrant, and without any notice. This legislation solves that, and I appreciate the members of the Conference Committee and their service on the Conference Committee and would appreciate members' support for the adoption.
Discussion on the motion to adopt. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading, Senate File 2466, as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Discussion to the bill. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill.
Members, please vote. Clerk will close the roll. There being 130 yeas and no nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to.
Message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce that the Senate has concurred in and adopted the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File 2192, an act relating to the environment. The report is addressed to the Honorable Sandra L. Pappas, President of the Senate, the Honorable Paul Thiessen, Speaker of the House, we, the undersigned conferees for House Senate File 2192, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report signed by all three conferees on the part of the Senate and all three conferees on the part of the House. Hortman moves that the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File 2192 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by conference.
Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is a bill about phasing out mercury and lead in products where there's a substitute available. And on the floor, we added an amendment having to do with banning the sale of triclosan for consumer products. The amendment by Representative Atkins delayed the effective date of that until 2017. And Representative Mullery added an amendment regarding environmental justice. In the conference committee, we retained the language on mercury and lead and the triclosan amendment, and the Senate refused to agree to the Mullery amendment. So the bill comes back to us a little lighter than when it left the floor.
Any discussion? Representative Mullery.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I agree with the report, and reluctantly I recommend everybody sign it because I've been informed that if we held out for our House position, it wouldn't come up on the Senate floor for passage, and therefore the rest of the bill, which is very important for the environment, wouldn't happen. It's unfortunate that Senate leadership wouldn't let the body over there vote on whether or not to just put in protection for people low income, ethnic, basically to prevent discrimination in the future against low-income people, people of different ethnic backgrounds, etc. Normally we back that very strongly. We don't approve of discrimination in this legislature, and it's just unfortunate, but this is a really important bill, so we couldn't possibly send it back and jeopardize the bill. So I recommend voting for it.
Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of adoption, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Report is adopted. Clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File 2192 as amended by conference.
Third reading. Discussion. Representative Hortman. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if Representative Hortman will yield.
She will yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hortman I do see that there is implications in the bill for wheel weights and prohibitions on using lead for wheel weights. I'm curious, can you expand on exactly what that is, what it means? I'm concerned about our farm operators and their ability to use products that they've always used that aren't harming the environment.
Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Representative Drazkowski, the idea of phasing out lead for wheel weights comes about because lead is a neurotoxin, and when it's in the environment and it gets in people's bodies, it's harmful to their brains, especially the brains of young children and developing fetuses. So where we can eliminate lead in useful products and substitute a different product, we want to do that. Specifically with regard to wheel weights, Representative McNamara had an amendment to delay the effective date so that folks in the industry would have time to get educated on the alternative products that are available. And the reason the Pollution Control Agency is moving to phase out these lead wheel weights at this time is that there's a substitute that's commercially available that does not contain lead.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for that description, Representative Hortman. It's kind of what I expected it is. Members, I encourage a no vote on the bill. What we see here is another effort to save people from themselves, and we've got farm operators and other people in industry that have been using products safely for a long time. These new products, as we see not only with vehicles and other things, but even in areas I'm familiar with dealing with, there's been attempts to ban lead for hunting and fishing equipment, slugs, jigs and other things. The alternatives for this are generally much, much more expensive, and I'd encourage a no vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would encourage members to vote yes. Yesterday I got an email from one of my constituents, a tire shop right in Hastings. I stopped by his business later yesterday and had a chat with him, and he said thank you very much for the extension to move it out a year and a half so he'd have time to use up his inventory of wheel weights, and he thought it made a common sense, so he was looking for support. Thank you, members.
Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'd encourage you to vote green. This is a fairly non-controversial bill. It gets mercury and lead out of the environment, which are two neurotoxins, and also will get some triclosan out of the environment in future years, which is an endocrine disruptor. So members, I'd encourage you to vote green. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members, please vote. Members, please vote. Clerk will close the roll. There being 110 yeas and 19 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration. Murphy E. for the Committee on Rules. Pursuant to Rule 121 and 333, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for the day for Friday, May 16, 2014. Senate file numbers 2438 and 1360, and House file numbers 2491 and 2031.
Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions on the desk, and online. If there are no objections, we will take actions on these motions first. Hearing no objections, the motions prevail. Announcements. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I wanted to let folks know that there's been some technical difficulty this afternoon in posting the delete all amendments to the two bonding bills that we're going to take up tomorrow. They were properly posted at about 5 minutes after 2, and so to comport with our rules about filing amendments, the window that usually closes at 6 o'clock for second-degree amendments is open until 8:30. So I just wanted to let people know I talked with Minority Leader Doubt and with his staff to make sure that I understood that there was some technical difficulty with our staff in getting it posted because the file is large. It's up now, and we wanted to make sure that we were, making sure everybody had time, the public had time to see what was happening, and people had time to file amendments. And so just wanted to make clear that we have worked through that and reached a conclusion. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 10 a.m. Thursday, May 15th, 2014.
Representative Murphy moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 10 a.m. Thursday, May 15th, 2014. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Rules will meet in 118 as soon as we're done. And with that, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Murphy moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion prevails. House is adjourned.